Hello, everyone. All right. Wow. Okay. Sometimes I wish I didn't come up with this because it's a huge responsibility. Okay, here we are. Writing. How many of you like to write? How many of you like to write in ASL? Great. All right. So when I grew up, I was in a hearing family. And as I saw people talking around me, no sign language, how did I handle it? I read, and I read a lot until I was 9, and I finally went into the school for the deaf. And they had built a new dorm, and I finally got in, and I saw all this sign language. I was absolutely shocked. As Shoshana mentioned, expression. At that time, did not know how to express myself. I only knew about, the mechanics of expression. But once I got into schools, I realized how to express my humanity. And what does it mean to be human? So I was born in 1960, but I was not truly born until I was 9 when I got into the school for the deaf. And that's when I was truly born a human. And I was able to see what was going on, and I felt like there were people like me. So I grew up in school, and until I was 12, I wrote everything. I wrote tons of things, and I wrote newspaper articles. And, of course, I had to give them to my English teacher, who always corrected my English, and I had to imitate her, the teacher. But I was not able to express myself like I was in ASL. But I was told, you have to write English, you have to read English. So I studied and I copied my English teacher all the way through college. And for years, I wanted to write, but I struggled. And one day, I was sitting, I had my coffee on my side, and I sat, mornings are my peak time to write, nights as well. During the daytime, I like to nap and teach ASL. So here I am sitting, not really with a pen, right? I'm at my computer. And I was struck by a question. If I can't write in my own language, who am I? I was really struck by this. So, okay, I realized we need to be able to write in ASL. So who's going to develop this language? Not me, of course. So then I needed to mimic English. I realized that's my only choice. As Roz said, that there's some words in one language you simply can't translate into another language, and that happens a lot with ASL. How do you bring this visual language and iron it thin to a linear language? It's just not good enough. So I just accepted it. In the meantime, I searched for my identity. And again, true expression was not there. And I was aware I can express in ASL, but not while I was writing. So I would have to ask a hearing person to translate something for me? Why? So, while I lived here, and I've been back and forth 4 times, but the first time I moved here, I was really social with many, many deaf people. And once deaf people realized I was able to write, they asked me to write their life story. And I had a lot of people approach me for that. Why? Why don't they write themselves? They don't want to, because they had bad experiences growing up. They were gunned down to a bloody pulp. And I understand that, okay? But I don't feel like it's right for me to write for them. Sure, I could. I can earn money, but that's not the point. The point is the expression is gone. Another thing is a quote. Hearing people are born to live, and deaf people are born to what? Explain. Don't you agree? I'm tired of explaining about us. I'm tired of it. So who can explain us? And what? What? In English? I want to drop English and explain ourselves in ASL, but in writing. So what am I to do? So let's hold that discussion for a minute, and I'd like to show you something. See these photos? They're both of Mount Everest. Has anybody visited? It's way in the Himalayas in China. There's Tibet, and there's a huge Mount Everest there. So can you see the two pictures? This is a drawing, a painting. And who painted this? An artist. That means we all look at it and enjoy it, but we're limited to the painter's point of view. Sure, there's a lot more information there, but you know, it's a very good painting. Do you want more information? We can't look into it more, but we can only see this picture. Even better, or even more real, would a video be better? Would a photo be better? It's still not enough. It's not good enough. If you'd like to know more about Mount Everest, there's cartography, which is a map. So let's talk about a map for a second. This doesn't look like Mount Everest, is it? It is. That is Mount Everest. So if you've if you know a little bit about reading a map, you can, even though it's a flat picture, it gives it a 3D shape in your mind, and it's all about how you read this information. And so, how is it 3D? Just like Rez explained this morning, the capture of the English word, you have to throw it out. But instead of the word 3 and D, this is the French sign showing three-dimensional. Isn't that beautiful? And that's our sign. You've got a three-dimensional sign, which is easily understood. And now on this map, you can see the different axes. You see 29,000 feet at the peak, and there's a whole lot of information about the topography, you know, where the valleys are, and tons of information that you can choose to read. You have the information to look at and cull through and realize, you know where to go, and you can understand Mount Everest better. So what does this have to do with ASL? Good question. In today's world, we have writing and spoken language. So what's the map of spoken language? Writing. Writing itself is the map of spoken language. There are many teachers, schools, children, professors who study language and how to read. That's like reading Mount Everest. You know, where the rivers are, where the valleys are. Those are nouns and verbs. So a noun is the foundation. The past tense maybe is the slope. The present tense are the rivers. The rain. All of that information is right there. The adjectives may be the height, the altitude. So fabulous. But there's a problem. The spoken language, there are different modalities. So signing is a visual language. Speaking, you listen. The comfort zones are different. Now maps has its language. There are 4,000 spoken languages in the world and only 200 written. Deaf people who sign, they have about 150 languages, but 0 written. And I think that is a crime. Something's missing. The true expression is missing because we learn to express through imitation. So, there's something missing. It's 3 dimensions. Okay, fine. Let's imagine a world where we've got 4,000 written, spoken languages, 200 written. Okay, well, they have tons of maps. Let's compare it to, say, if you go into a new city and you ask for a description for a food store, and the person will say, yeah, you go there and you see there's a few intersections and you take a right 4 blocks and then you take a left 6 blocks and then you'll see a light and go up the hill. So there's a limited view as to what that person just told you. You got to remember all the twists and turns, right? You got to turn left and right and go up the hill, and that's where you found the food store. That's a map. You know, what about a map? If they open a map and they can show you where to twist and turn, where to take a left and right, but you might realize, oh, wait a minute, I want to go this way. I want to go past the park and the waterfall. You might follow a different journey. That's just like the map I show up here. This map here, this gives you a completely open perspective on the mountain. Just like written ASL will provide many, many views on ASL, because written English is linear. Written ASL will be able to provide so much more information. Why is the hand shaped like this? Why does the person choose this? That is the true expression of ASL. So, you know, let's take a look at this here. We've got 2 worlds, which might mean we have, you know, as we know, we've got the alphabet, which has the letter. I think it's time to show the clear difference between the 2 modalities, spoken and visual. And the new term is digibet, with digits, which are handshapes shown in writing. Now, to add more information about writing, maybe the mountains and the valleys, what deaf people tend to do is use a left hand or a right hand. Now, you can do that in writing. You can add more information about that person or the writer. You've got A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, E, F. And in the digibet, you're showing both the left and the right hand. In the English, there's only one way. There's no expansion or gloss. There's nothing there. What does this mean then? Depth. It adds depth to ASL. When I visit the Marlton School for the Deaf, when I visited before, I showed them this digibet, and the kids were really enthusiastic. They were hungry. They didn't give me any expression about, why do I have to learn how to write? When I showed them, their eyes lit up. They were thrilled. They were hungry. I saw hunger, and they were excited to learn more. I trained them, and one little girl came up to me, and she handed me a piece of paper. What does this say? And I said, hey, it says pink. And the girl was thrilled. She went back to her chair and said, yes. It showed pride. Why? Because it was her own language, her identity, and no one can criticize it. No one. Wow, think about that. Now imagine if a kid, they're born to a deaf family, and I was lucky to be one of them, but a kid goes to his parents and signs, and the parents say, oh, yes, very good. Now go ahead and go play. And the kid goes and plays, and the parents forget about that memory. Now the kid is writing an ASL, and they give that to their parents, and the parents say, wow, that's nice. And they'll pin it on the refrigerator because it's hers. It's her map. It's a map of a children's thoughts, of deaf thoughts. Relationships, relatives, and friends may ask, what is that? What is that? And it will lead to more information. And the parents might say, wait a minute, I can write an ASL. They might take a class, or they might learn from their children, which will encourage dialogue. Now the children don't have to match the English, but the parents can match the ASL. Who can argue against writing? We already know that. A friend of mine at Marlton here, their children went to Gallaudet and saw ASL writing. One time they were visiting, during the protest, and they asked me, how do you write an ASL? So I showed it to them, and they flew home, and they shared it at the dinner table. And the children who had never experienced that before said, whoa, that's writing an ASL? And the adult said, how do you know? It's just in the body, You can't argue with writing. So let me show you what our map looks like. Not just mine, but others. Here you've got two-handed, the left and the right. So it's more than that. We have 70 for each hand. So at the Marlton School, the students learn to write animals. Horse, whale, bird, mouse, elephant, turtle, all of these. Oh, my time is running out. Okay, so what does this prove? Children can pick up writing with enthusiasm. This process will lead to something so important, a corpus. We need ASL corpus in literature, and this will help standardize ASL, which is what we've been talking about for some time. To standardize ASL, how do you do it? It's writing. And this will also help training with interpreters, right? They're well-versed in English, and they can sign all right. But in ASL, they have to really work hard. The interpreters will finally be able to match the deaf in ASL with specabulary, spatial ASL. So clerk and Gallaudet, that's what these two words are. So this was written last week. Wow. You know this poem by Clayton Valley? Remember the lens that you have to look through? Now we can look back and see it all. We do not need to limit our vision anymore. Now you can see the whole thing, adjectives, verbs, nouns, in 3 dimensions. Here you are. That's the map. And do we need to explain anymore? No. The books can explain for us, and we can live. Thank you.